Okay? Now, we are at Tucker's Grove Campground. Tucker's Grove Campground was placed on the National Register in 1974. It was founded in 1871, and it took 4 years for the deed to get settled in 74, and which is on the marker outside. That marker I donated that marker to this campground from Dr. Alan Studemeyer from Emory University. He wrote, I was a consultant for him on his book, A Place at the Table, and the way he paid me was to give me the money to buy that marker, and he also hired a research assistant for me, Maya Florence, and we did research on the history of black people in East Lincoln. This campground grew out of what we call the campground movement. And it did not grow out of Rock Springs campground, which was a predominantly white camp meeting. In 1869, W.G. Matton, a white minister from Ireland, came to Lincoln, and he and a black minister named James Anderson, they pulled a congregation out of Rock Springs and established a camp meeting called Seven Springs between Rock Springs and Brevard Chapel. And of course, it was on an integrated basis, black and white people smuggled some liquor into the campground, which ensued a riot, and the white people went back to Rock Springs, and then there was a movement doing Reconstruction to get rid of the black people at Seven Springs. So they embarked on looking for a place to move their camp meeting. And finally they found this place here was originally in a grove on William Tucker's property. And William Tucker gave them permission to have their first camp meeting here. And they had the first camp meeting in 1871. However, he agreed that he would sell this land to them, but he died. And it was not until 1874 that they was able to secure the land from his wife, from his widow. And that's why this camp meeting is called Tucker's Grove, because it was built in a grove, grove on William Tucker's plantation. And we are here now to begin a tour of historic places of Lincoln County. And it'd be fitting that we start here, because this Iron Station is a historic district. It has 5 places that is on the historic places of National Historic Places list. And this is one of them. There's another one we call Magnolia. We call it the Roundhouse. We call it the Vesuvius Furnace. We have the Morrison House, and which is further down this road. This is called McPeeler. Of course, when we came in here on Brevard Road, we saw that old church sitting to the left with the rock fence around it. That is on the National Register of Historic Places. Every place on the National Register, black people played a major role and part in the establishment. You have any questions? You mean to tell me you say that you are interested in Lincoln County history, and you have no questions? What about this campground?
I have a question.
Yes?
I noticed that there are structures that go all around this particular site, this tent area. What's the purpose of these structures? And a lot of them look old, some of them look newer. How were they built, and again, what's the purpose of them?
These are called tents because originally they were tents. But then as people began to come here every year, the trustees of the campground decided to let particular families build structures on the property. In other words, the structures are owned by individual families, but the land underneath it belongs to the trustees of the campground. It looks like some of them are old and some new. Like that one there, it is one of the original ones, and all the rest of them are pretty old. And they got a few back down here. What happened was, over the years, they have had fires and burned down the original, and these are the ones that was built back. And what we're standing in this structure is called an arbor. Originally, it had a shingle roof, and the people used to come meet down here ever so often, and they would chip and make shingles, make wood shingles. In the 1920s, they decided that they would dispense of the wooden shingles and put a tin roof. And if you look at the structure, you got some new wood here. That's because the Duke Endowment gave $100,000 to restore this building and the structure, and they put new wood in there, and they put nails and studs. If you look at the top, you see these. See, there are no nails there. It's called peg and dowels. So the original structure did not have any nails at all. What this was all about is that after the growing season and the crops lay by, these people would come here for a week and have a religious service, what they call a camp meeting. And what happened was that these people kept, after the camp meeting was over, they would come back the next week and do the same thing. And then they would come back the next week. So the campground decided, we're going to make this a church. So they made it a church. But the thing about that, you could only use it in warm weather. Then the trustees in 1880 decided to build a church. And they built a church called Tucker's Grove. This is the church that we passed up on the road. And then after next year, 1885, they bought land for a cemetery. And then in 1886, they decided that the trustees of the campground and the trustees of the church had to be separate. So they created a separate trustee board for the church. And it went into the Methodist Episcopal Church. Tucker's Grove is now a United Methodist Church. And if there are not any more questions, we can go to, oh, yes, go ahead.
The buildings that are here, are they all equipped with electricity?
All the buildings are equipped with electricity. And during camp meeting, they bring porta-johns here in the back. And the electricity is turned on only during that week of camp meeting. And right now, this is in September. The last was in August. It was in the last of August. There are nobody here. There's no electricity turned on. But some of them actually have inside bathrooms with septic tanks. but most do not. And it's the responsibility of the families to maintain the upkeep, and it is the family's responsibilities to pay for the electricity that is being used during that week. So what they do is the whole, everybody pitch in and pay just a few dollars for the electricity that was used during the week.
So is there anyone that look after this place, like watchman or?
The trustees. The trustees come from the churches in this area. The trustee for this area was Larry Friday, whom you saw I'm talking to up there in the Life Center. They have Brevard Chapel. They have a trustee from Brevard Chapel. They have one from Ebenezer. They have one, of course, from Tulsa Grove. They have one from Gold Hill, which is in down on Old Plank Road. And anyway, it's 5 of them anyway.
So this place has never been fenced, sealed around.
I didn't understand.
This was never sealed around, like, you know.
No, that never had size, because arbor come from the word arbor. Arbor mean tree. Originally, brush arbors was poles standing up across the top, and then you pile brush on top of it. And that was to have protracted revivals, because the churches started in small buildings and everything, and they didn't have enough space, so they built a brush arbor. Now, this didn't never have to be a brush arbor, because they was going to come back here year after year. A brush arbor, if it stayed there, the trees would die, and and rot and all, So that it was never intended to have an enclosure, because it was never an enclosure. It was called an arbor. Yes? Are you? Any more questions? Well, it's no question, then we'll adjourn to the next.
Nobody come in and vandalize this place.
Well, there's nowhere to.
I mean.
Yeah, it has been vandalized before,
open.
but people have come here and set it on fire deliberately before, So, and then drunks and winos and I've seen people bring their girlfriends and stuff down here, like Lover's Lane and all this kind of stuff, Any place that is left abandoned and isolated like this draw vandals or people that's up to no good. Okay, we will go to the next. Yes. It'd been better if one of the trustees had been doing this, since they run the place.
somebody just build this and come and put it down there.
Okay. We are looking at a replica of Tucker's Grove United Methodist Church that was built in 1907. The campground built the first church in 1880, and that church was torn down, and this church was built in 1907. This particular model was made by Ernest Wingate, and it is exact to scale of the old church that was there, that faced the same direction as the church is there. And it had a schoolhouse between the church and the campground, and it was a Rosenwald school. We are at Macpila Presbyterian Church, built in 1842. Alexander Brevard and W.A. Graham went into business in the iron industry, and they jointly operated Vesuvius Furnace. And so they decided that they was going to build a church halfway between their homes, which was Mount Terza and Vesuvius. Now, this church has services once a year on Easter Sunday. And this is the church that Dr. Robert Hall Morrison pastored. Dr. Robert Hall Morrison was the first president of Davidson College. And he pastored here, and as you know, four of his daughters married Confederate officers, and one of them was Stonewall Jackson. And when I went in this church, I sat in every chair, every seat there, every pew, so I could say that I sat in the same pew as Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson came from Virginia down here and married Anna Morrison, the daughter of Stonewall Jackson. And we are going to now get ready to go over to the cemetery. This cemetery was built in 1853, and as you know, it got a rock wall around it. And you have some of the most impressive monuments that in those cemetery at this time. And this cemetery is important because they have Robert D. Johnson, who was the master of Lawson Johnson, who was a member of Tucker's Grove later on. Lawson Johnson served in the Confederate Army, and he has the distinction of being one of the first slaves who became a regularly, duly enlisted soldier within the Confederate Army. Because most blacks who served in the Confederate Army was listed officially as camp servants. But since this guy was originally formally enlisted, he was one of the first families, one of the first black Confederate soldiers, and all black soldiers must have been enlisted after March 13, 1863. That is the year that the Confederacy authorized black Confederate soldiers. This is a funeral that housed Robert D. Johnson because he went to California and came back and named the road we call Mariposa after Mariposa, California. Of course, Mariposa means butterfly in Spanish. Place. This is the thing for Captain Alexander Brevard. Captain Alexander Brevard is also the partner to William A. Graham that was built Vesuvius, and his family, along with the Grahams, built this cemetery. And you see that Franklin Graham, that was a descendant of his, because it has what you call a Confederate flag there. That means that this guy served in the Confederate Army. That means that he's a couple generations removed from the original Alexander Brevard. Alexander Brevard is the one who sent his brother Robert Brevard to Charleston to buy a slave named Hannibal Smith, because Hannibal Smith had a superior knowledge of iron manufacturing. So they brought him to Lincoln County and took him to Vesuvius furnace, and he increased the efficiency of the furnace 25%. These are the original mausoleums, or what you call it. They're above ground, and you can see all they did was put a plaque on top of it. And I've looked into some of these, and the bodies are no longer in there. They either rags, or, it might be a few bones, but there's nothing in there recognizable as a human being. And this is James Graham. He was one of the originals who started the iron industry with the Davison family. The Graham and the Davison family moved from Mecklenburg County over here and started the iron industry in Lincoln County. This is Major William A. Graham. That is they're talking about the son of William A. Graham, who was the governor of North Carolina and who served in the Confederate Congress, and was also the Secretary of the Navy. This William Graham, he operated Vesuvius furnace for years. This is the Round House. It is also on the National Register of Historic Places. I worked here one summer during high school. This is on the W.A. Graham Place. On the way here, we passed through Stanley, North Carolina. And we arrived here at the Roundhouse. It took us at least 20 minutes to get here at the speed limit. That is how big this plantation was. Now, they call it the Roundhouse because it looked round, but it's not really round. It has 16 sides to it. You look and you see that there's 16 sides to make it appear as if it's a round house. When I was in high school, I put hay in that up in the loft there. At that time, it was not on the National Register of Historic Places. It was on a working farm. And then since then, they made it the Roundhouse. This is the W.A. Graham plantation. And we will leave here and we will drive by the plantation house. And that the plantation house is a ways from here. And the town of Stanley was donated by the Brevard family. Like I said, the Grahams and the Brevards, they were business partners. And we will now go to the plantation house.
I was hoping I could.
When you look at it at National Register, it's called Round Barn.